Lots of chairs if anybody wants them. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning for our annual Public Safety Press briefing on public safety. So we're joined by a lot of our public safety partners today. And honestly, this is one of my favorite briefings to do, even though we're talking about crime and public safety and so forth, because it's very rare that you get all of your public safety partners together to show the unity that we have as different agencies. And this community probably shouldn't take that for granted, the fact that all of these agencies work in tandem together, that there's no turf wars, that there's no territorialism, that we just work so well. And you're going to see the proof of some of that in some of the numbers that we're going to be sharing today. So I want to thank those that are here today. You're going to hear from quite a few of our partners, so we're all going to be fairly brief to leave time for questions at the end. But you hear from Chief John Thum with Sioux Falls PD, Sheriff Mike Milstead, Deputy Jeff Gromer from the Sheriff's Office. You're going to hear from State's Attorney Daniel Hager with Minnehaha County, and then from Attorney General Marty Jackley. So again, we host an annual and a mid-year public safety briefing each year to add context to crime stats. You know, one of the most important things that communities expect and residents expect is to feel safe in their communities. It's probably one of the topics that people bring up the most is crime and public safety, which is why we do this twice a year, to just give people a handle on what's going on with the state of public safety in our community. And honestly, now doing this, you know, the fact that we do it twice a year, this is probably my 12th, 13th, 14th time I've done this. This is probably going to be one of the proudest public safety briefings that I've done because of some of the numbers that we're going to share with you all today. So, you know, I can write the headline for you. That is, we continue to see a decrease in our crime per capita, and this is a safe community, as you'll see here momentarily. And it's the result of very intentional police work, very intentional messaging campaigns, which we've been doing more of, and the partner collaboration, which I just alluded to in my opening there. So for our first slide, I want to talk a little bit about our population growth, which we all know Sioux Falls continues to grow at that between 2.5% every year, and that compounds on a bigger number. And that's why when we look at numbers, we always want to look at per capita numbers. And I always like to set the stage with this to say, when we have crime briefings like this, will we have more crime in our city? Of course we will, because we have more people. We added 5,000 people last year. They're not all choir boys, so we will have some crime that comes with that. But the per capita number is what's very, very important. Are we still keeping our per capita numbers even, or in some cases decreasing? That's our goal. So since I became mayor in 2018, we've added, almost 38,000 residents. For our state friends watching, legislators watching, we've added 2.5 peers to Sioux Falls since I took office. So that's, around 5,000 people every single year to this community. Geographically, on the next slide, you can see how we've grown. In 2001, we were about 58 square miles. This past January, we're around almost 87 square miles. So you can see the increase in territory that we have to police as well, and that we have to serve with our partners between the Sheriff's Office and Sioux Falls PD, and that we have to work and have to patrol. So in 25 years, that's almost a 50% increase in square miles in the city of Sioux Falls. So we're stretched in every corner of the city. We still have a single precinct here at our LEC. We have a report to work location, but this is something we'll continue to look and analyze as we grow. On the next slide, you'll see our calls for service, which have been fairly consistent. Which is to me, that's quite encouraging as we've grown, from 2019 to 2025. You take that 5,000 to 6,000 per year, that's 6,000, that's 30,000 people, and those calls have been fairly consistent over that time. It's an average of about 360 calls per day last year, but we obviously expect those numbers to grow as our population grows as well. But this is the slide I really want people to focus on, and this to me will be the takeaway, hopefully, from this entire briefing. And this is our violent and property crime per 1,000 residents, our per capita slide from this past year. And you can see the dramatic decrease that we had in our property crime numbers in 2025, and also our decrease in our violent crime numbers as well. So we can continue to see a downward trend in our violent crime numbers, but a big downward trend in our property crime numbers. And the chief is going to talk through that, what's driving that. And so very, very proud that as I leave office in a few months, we're leaving the city in a very safe spot, thanks to the work that the men and women in blue and in beige and other colors do for this city and this community, and the partners that we have that do this work together. So with that, I'm going to ask Chief John Thum to come up and dive into the numbers a little bit more specifically that have driven those trends you saw there. So Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. Got to put on the readers today for this one. So, but no, we want to talk about the per capita, and people want explanations for why the per capita would be down. So we'll get right into the violent crime statistics and what we see. And we saw a decrease in all major categories in 2025. Now, homicides draw a lot of attention, and you'll see in the statistics, past 2 years, we did have close to 27 homicides. But again, if we look, the homicides are told by the individual story, not necessarily by a number. What we continue to see is not homicides against random or uninvolved people. It's people who know each other. It's people who have some sort of relationship, and many oftentimes engaged in some measure of activity with each other. And so we'll continue to look at these numbers. Obviously, homicides grab a lot of headlines, but it's a small sample size in the overall picture of what we're seeing within our community. Here's where we see aggravated assaults and see a decrease across the board. And I kind of looked for this purpose back to 23, the decrease from 25. And we see a decrease in both aggravated assaults, domestic, and aggravated assaults that are non-domestic, and that's encouraging as well. So we move into robberies. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on some of these just because I want to get the overall themes. Decrease in robberies as well, decrease in rapes. Again, and that's kind of plateaued at a lower level than it was previously. And you see with those overall pictures of decreases across all those major violent crime categories, that explains the decrease per capita. That's our lowest level in about, I think, 6 years. But if we move into property crimes, you saw the big downward spike. And I think the big downward spike within property crimes is a story that needs to be highlighted. But here's the explanation within the numbers. Burglaries, substantial decrease. Again, you'll have the stats. You can look at the numbers on your own. But again, that's a remarkable decrease there. Larcenies also decreased at a substantial pace. Vandalism's decreased at a substantial pace. But really, what we kind of want to highlight is the stolen vehicles in particular. Fraud. Did see an increase in fraud. And so we look for the numbers, the explanation. What we did see within fraud, and this is a good chance if you're paying attention and have family and loved ones, part of that increase was due to cyber scams targeting some of our senior citizens and other people who are maybe not as familiar with some of the structures, but it's a lot of cryptocurrency. We've talked about in the past where people are asked to deposit money, fake warrants that people call people about. There's all these different scams that have kind of risen up, which is kind of driving the fraud numbers up. The other thing that's driving some of the fraud numbers up is statewide there was some SNAP benefit fraud cases that hit the entire state. And we, of course, being the biggest city within the state, had a substantial number of those cases as well. So that's the story on fraud. But the big story, I think, for me, and we've kind of hinted at this for a while, we've talked a ton about it, about stolen vehicles. We've seen a 44% decrease since 2023 in stolen vehicles. And that's a substantial decrease. Again, talking to some of our counterparts, we're seeing this around other spots of the country as well. But this decrease is substantial and seemed impossible when we came together in 2023, talked about the meteoric rise of stolen vehicles. We're like, what do we do as a community to make sure we take care of this? Started with public messaging and ad campaign. Started with Sam Clemens and now Benson and me continually saying, lock your vehicles, still with 82% of those vehicles being unlocked that were stolen. So the messaging campaign, but there's other layers to this as well. Our violent crime unit has had a big part to play with this, is the nexus between stolen vehicles and violent crime is one we can't deny. I always say criminals aren't mutually exclusive to one caption of crime. They typically engage in quite a few other ones. Oftentimes violent crime unit is where we're seeing is people looking for guns within unlocked stolen vehicles and use those stolen vehicles to commit other crimes. So if you put together our crime unit success, targeted messaging, some of our advanced technology, which we'll talk about later, and a support response from the community and from the council and from the mayor's office to all get on board with delivering this message, I think that's where we see substantial success and also therefore a decrease in some of those per capita numbers that when I saw was incredibly pleased with. And I think as a community, we should be incredibly pleased as well. We'll get into drug seizures. Again, these stats will be available for you as well, so we're just going to get them really quick. But drug seizures continue to kind of plateau or go down a little bit, and we'll kind of get into some of the nuance of them, because I believe here's one I wanted to talk about. You see a substantial decrease in fentanyl. Fentanyl really grabs a lot of the attention, a lot of the highlights of what's there within drugs right now within our country. We have seen supplies become much harder to come by within our community, and the seizure numbers kind of show that as well. Our drug task force does a great job of working on these cases in partnership with our federal partners, but I think it's safe to say some of the measures taken within the southern border are paying dividends for our community as the supply doesn't get further into the country as we saw in previous years. We'll continue to monitor that trend. Again, we're not going to say that there's not drugs within our community, but usually that's a good measure of what we see, and we can continue to work on and identify the problems with our collaborative effort with both state, local, and federal partners to continue to work on that. Again, overdoses as well, which kind of ties into the fentanyl conversation. We've seen positive trends. Again, one overdeath is too many, so I struggle to use positive, but we're seeing stability and decrease across a couple of categories. And again, I think there's a lot of community-wide efforts to go through this. I believe part of our success as a community is we've done a really good job collaboratively with nonprofits within the schools, within our partners, to message to young people that fentanyl is not to be messed with. You only get one chance or one mistake, and it could be your last one. And I think as I talk to young people, the stigma we're creating negatively around the use of fentanyl is one that we can continue to push to our young people and hopefully continue to see these trends go that direction. Wanted to highlight some of our proactive enforcement efforts, which also contribute to some of our success that we've seen. And I think if we look at the Real-Time Information Center, which we unveiled a little over a year ago, the numbers are there. Assisted on 559 calls for service, clear 165 calls, released 185 officers from dispatch calls, bringing them up to go to other duties. And one I wanted to highlight was established a cause in 124 crashes. Like we talk about crime, we talk about technology benefiting in the violent crime front or the property crime front. Well, we're also, as an average citizen, when you get in a car accident and there's no witness to say what happened one way or the other, we're now able to leverage some of these cameras and say this is the cause of the accident, provide that to the officer, provide a streamlined experience for people when they have aggravation of having a car accident. And that's, I think, a great public service that we can provide. Real-Time Information Center contributed to 64 individual arrests, recovery of 37 stolen vehicles, 3 firearms, and cleared 52 case reports, generated leads in multiple cases, and supported issuance of 3 arrest warrants. We're just getting the tip of the iceberg of this Real-Time Information Center as we continue to build and grow within this program and expect more success and more solid results from us in the future. Violent Crime Unit, we've talked about a lot, seized 66 firearms, recovered 40 stolen vehicles, 251 arrests, and 5 joint federal operations targeting violent crime and gang activity within our community. Again, they continue to do great things, and again, that ripples within other crime captions that we see, and again, looking forward to that. Still, we'll talk about all these stats. What's the key thing somebody grabs me at the grocery store and talks about? The way people drive and speed. Our multi-agency saturation patrols between us, the Highway Patrol, Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office, Lincoln County Sheriff's Office have been running for several years. We've talked about them in other press briefs. From 24 to 25, we nearly doubled our citations issued within these saturation patrols. And again, we'll continue to do those and target aggressive and unsafe driving. And again, there's still plenty of work to do there, but wanted to highlight that as well. They do outstanding work. And then one more is just our clearance rates. Our investigators are incredibly professional. They carry substantial caseloads. They work very, very hard, and the clearance rates that we see across all categories speak for themselves. They clear crimes about better than anywhere in the country. And again, these rates are something we can be incredibly proud of. Our detectives work with their investigative might and professionalism to work on these cases. I think in some communities, for example, when we have a homicide, maybe a couple detectives are assigned to that. We put all our effort collectively as investigators and patrol to work these cases, gun cases, other things that are there. And again, this is a success for the department, but really highlights our investigators and the outstanding work they do. So, give you some key takeaways. We've seen a decrease across most areas, violent property crimes, and the result of PD actions and community actions and partnerships at both the state, local, and federal level. I want to highlight we are at a 5-year low for violent crime per capita and really an unprecedented low for violent crime for property crimes. I always kind of tell people when I do some of my public speaking gigs, We need to celebrate good news, not just bad news. And I can guarantee this is good news for our community, and I encourage us to celebrate it, to look at what we've done, look at what efforts we can double down on, and continue to increase and invest. And of course, you give me a podium and a microphone, I'm going to also point out that is highlighted by mentoring and getting involved in the lives of young people. The stats are undeniable about childhood literacy, childhood intervention, and how that contributes to success down the road and lack of involvement in the criminal justice system. So again, that's the part you play as the community, again, to keep telling this successful story. One more thing to highlight. This will be the last public safety press brief with Mayor TenHaken that I've had the privilege of doing. And it's been an honor and a privilege to work with him on these topics. Again, a true supporter of first responders, a true supporter of law enforcement. We've had incredible challenges during his tenure, unprecedented to what other mayors have experienced in this category. And it's been a privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with him, along with other partners, to work on these and really make positive impact. And I think for whoever takes over, we are moving in a good direction and can move and continue this momentum in a positive way that contributes to the public safety of our community and our state. Also, our last public safety press brief, potentially with Sheriff Milstead. Again, he's been an outstanding partner for our agency for years. As you know, he was with our agency and then moved to the sheriff's position somewhere in the past. I won't give an exact year, but he's been there a while. So to be able to work with him collaboratively with our agencies, to walk across the hallway, work on issues, deal with problems, it's been an incredible honor. And again, I think one of the key things we can highlight from his tenure is the collaboration and cooperation between our agencies, and that is key for the public safety of our community. If we continue to invest in working together and picking up pieces where other people are at in pushing forward, that is a net benefit to our community and something that has to be stressed and emphasized for the future. And so with that, I'll give you Sheriff Mike Milstead for some comments. Or was it Gromer? Gromer. Well, you know, you can come first, Gromer. So.
Good morning. Jeff Gromer, Chief Deputy with the Sheriff's Office. I'm just going to touch briefly on some of the jail numbers and what we're seeing out of the jail. Short answer for the jail is we are seeing some growth, but we're not seeing anything that was unexpected or unforeseen, basically. The numbers in the jail, what we're seeing for the average daily population is what we tend to focus on when we're looking at jail management is they're generally increasing over the last couple of months. But when we look back at the graph that we see, they also increased last year, roughly at this same time of year. So the Minnehaha County numbers is the lighter blue bar on the bottom. And you can see in the previous February, March, into April and May, they increased before leveling off and coming down slightly. What we've seen the last couple of months is they're starting to increase again this time around, but generally what we're seeing is that kind of expected or projected increase. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the individual numbers other than to mention that we have that kind of expected increase. One thing I do want to talk about in conjunction with what the chief said about the general crime going down, but jail numbers yet continue on that incremental increase. A lot of that is due to what we've talked about previously is these repeat offenders that are coming and going, folks on probation, folks on parole that are coming into jail. When we take a look at those numbers, we routinely operate with about 80 people in jail facing new criminal charges that were also on parole supervision at the time of their arrest. In addition to that, this is a very hard number for the jail to pull, so we don't pull it real often because it requires going through the individual cases. But in July of '25, we were looking at 113 individuals who were on probation at the time of their arrest. So they're either on probation and arrested for new charges or in jail for violating that probation. When you look at the 80 parolees that are in jail plus the 113 or so folks on probation that are currently in jail, we're just about half of our Minnehaha County jail population was also on supervision at the time of their arrest. That really kind of leads to that general increase we're talking about. Those cases become more complicated, they take longer, those folks stay in jail longer, and obviously they're more serious offenders because they've already been convicted and under supervision previously. So that is where I really think we're seeing most of our growth in the jail population is these folks that are staying longer due to being under supervision at the time of their arrest. I also want to touch on our programs. These programs that we operate through the jail, those are the jail numbers. That just breaks down the number of Minnehaha County inmates and then all the other entities that we're holding people for. But the jail programs have been a very significant player in maintaining our jail populations at the level there are. Both the pretrial service program and the 24/7 program, when you look at the 300-plus participants in each program, some of those overlap and are counted in both, but there's a significant number of these people either on pretrial program or within the 24/7 program that if we didn't offer those services, those folks would be in jail. These programs really help us control our jail population to the extent possible by making sure that we're keeping people that can be successful with a little bit of assistance out of jail rather than just leaving them in jail. With that, I think I'm pretty happy with the way things are going for the jail right now. Obviously, the numbers do continue to go up and fluctuate a little bit, but that's not unforeseen. We planned, when we did the expansion a number of years ago, we planned to be moving into some vacant space in there, and we're about 4 to 5 years past schedule on that. So we've been able to delay occupying that for 4 to 5 years, which has been that's a huge accomplishment for the jail and the county. It really helps us to manage our population, staffing, and budgets accordingly. So with that, I'll let the sheriff touch on some sheriff's office stats.
I can't let the mayor up me on this. When I started on the PD, it was in the basement of this building of City Hall. And when I started, we've seen since I've started on the PD, our town has grown by 150,000 people. So a little bit more than their 38. So these are our basic crime stats that you see. We're mirroring what the city is seeing with a decrease in crime. And I put that on a couple things, in particular, the partnerships that we have. The chief spoke to it, the mayor spoke to it. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'm active in National Sheriff's Association on the board of directors there, and to listen to places where the sheriffs can't get along with the police and they don't get along with the state highway patrol and they don't get along with the DCI. We have the opposite here. It's an incredible environment that has been growing over the years, most recently with the people that are in this room, our state's attorney or attorney general or mayor or police chief or DCI director and their staff. When you walk into our building and look at the team that is working there, you don't know who's a DCI agent or a PD officer or a deputy sheriff. They're working together. They're engaging in these crime investigations together, and I couldn't be more proud of what kind of a establishment of partnerships that we have here. A little bit on our crime stats, like I say, they pretty closely mirror what goes on. As you know, in our patrol division, the sheriff's office in Minnehaha County we are the local police department in every community in Minnehaha County with the exception of Brandon and Sioux Falls. So we have partnerships with all of those. They contract with our services, and then we also provide all of the rural patrols. We saw a slight increase in calls last year, but nothing concerning at all. We have a warrant division. We have a joint fugitive task force, and on that task force, we have Lincoln County Sheriff's deputy, we have our deputies, a supervisor, and we have full-time participation from the Sioux Falls PD. That task force goes after the worst of the worst. They're the ones that when there's a major crime in the community, they identify the perpetrator, they go to that group, and then their partner is the Violent Crime Task Force of the PD, and they work those cases. And so, again, they're in a very high-risk position. Between us, our partners in this room, we've served 12,500 warrants last year. That's how busy we are, how many people were picked up on warrants through that division. We have a civil division, which is something the city doesn't have, but it's the civil side of things. We processed over 11,700 civil papers last year, about a 10% increase. What are those? Those are the foreclosures, judgments, executions, mental health petitions, protection orders, those lockouts and things like that. So that's an important part of what we do, and we do see an increase in that. I just want to speak just for a minute about the clearance rate that we're seeing, and in particular the statistics provided by Chief Thum. and at the same time are increasing jail numbers. Part of the increasing jail numbers is the fact that we're catching more bad people, right? They're catching more criminals. They're keeping our community safe. This is a safe place to live and raise your family. That's why our population is increasing at the rate that it is, and that these partnerships are so critical for us. One of the other things that happens, though, is the reason for the success in that clearance rate is the people of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. They're not afraid to be nosy neighbors. And I would encourage them to continue to do that, to be active with things like Crime Stoppers, to be willing to report something if you see something unusual. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there's been a worldwide call to seek revenge on the American people. And we've been preaching for years, if you see something, say something. And I think it's a good time for all of our citizens to remember that there are threats in our society, there are threats within our own country today, that we all need to be more diligent. So we live in a great and a safe community, but if you see something, say something. I think it's a good time to remind people of just that. Again, since the mayor's not going to be the mayor anymore, and I'm not going to be the sheriff anymore, and the chief doesn't know yet. Just kidding. What an honor it's been to serve with you and Daniel Hager and all the people in this room, DCI directors and supervisors. This is, man, I consider that I'm going out on the top because of the people that I've worked with and that I work for. So with that, I'll pass it to my state's attorney, Daniel Hager.
Well, good morning. Appreciate an opportunity to talk with the community and each of you about good things, right? I think the headline is a great thing when you can say crime is down or crime is holding steady in these areas. That's a phenomenal thing. I want the community to know that our local partners and the State Attorney's Office, we're not just going to sit idly by and celebrate that. We're going to keep working and making sure that those numbers continue to go down. When you look at those calls for service, each of those calls for service, you have hardworking patrol officers who are responding to that. So that's a tremendous amount of work that our law enforcement is doing to help keep our community safe. When you see those arrests, that's a tremendous amount of quality work that's being done by our detectives, and so that's going to continue. When those cases get to my office, my office charged out just over 4,000 felonies, just under 9,000 misdemeanors last year. Those are cases that our great partners have brought to us. We're putting our best effort forth on those, and that's going to continue. But I think what's important to me and important to the community to know is that our public safety isn't determined by a 6-month period. It's not a specific week, a case, or a moment in time. It is dedication to public safety, and it's the hard work that our law enforcement is doing to make sure that our community remains safe. I'm blessed to have gotten to work with Chief Thum, and we're going to continue to do that, but blessed to have worked with Mayor TenHaken, Sheriff Milstead, and Attorney General Jackley, as well as everyone else in this room. But their dedication to public safety is what really matters today. Their strengthening of collaboration has enabled us to be at a point where we can stand up and say the headlines are good. And I know that that's going to continue, but that leadership has put our community in a good position. It's emboldened our citizens to call law enforcement and to have confidence when they call law enforcement, know that they're coming, and to know that that case is going to be dealt with in a great way. And so, again, as those leaders move on to whatever they do next, they leave a legacy where they can be honored for their dedication to public safety, and the work that I'm going to do in the future will continue off of that bedrock that they've built. So I appreciate all of the law enforcement work and good work that they're doing, and look forward to continuing to work with them. Now, Attorney General Jackley.
Good morning, everyone. I'm surrounding myself with DCI in case you have any hard questions. when you look at the statewide crime statistics, overall in South Dakota, we're down over 6%. Violent crime is down 7.78%. And what that tells me as Attorney General, that South Dakota and Sioux Falls are safe places to raise a family. And the numbers that you just heard from the mayor and the chief and the state's attorney and the sheriff, I think demonstrate how safe Sioux Falls is. And I really attribute the numbers being down statewide and here in Sioux Falls to about 3 different things. Number one is, and you heard the sheriff talk a lot about it, it's our citizens. It's how they are law-abiding and how they cooperate with us, how they call us, how they work with us when something bad happens or to prevent something bad. And that's key and important. When you look at some of the overall numbers, especially the drug numbers, they're down 6.25%. And I think it's attributable to securing that southern border. It's just simply getting harder to get certain drugs and other illegal things across that border, and it's making us safer. And then really third, which I can't emphasize enough, it's the partnerships that you've heard about today. It's having a mayor that cares about public safety, but doesn't just care, he does it. It's about Chief Thum, it's about Sheriff Milstead, it's about State's Attorney Hager, it's about the DCI in partnerships with so many different areas, whether it's the Sioux Falls Drug Task Force, ICAC, other matters. We work exceptionally well together. That doesn't happen in some other places in the United States, but it happens here in South Dakota. And what Sioux Falls does is a model not just here in South Dakota, but across the nation. So where do we go from here? I mean, we all want to see these numbers continue to stay down. And I emphasize there's a couple of things that need to happen. One, the partnerships need to continue. I mean, we've been blessed to have Mayor TenHaken and Sheriff Milstead. They're leaving, but I assure you those partnerships are going to continue. Second of all, we know we have challenges with parole and probation. The state is looking at it. They're looking at rehabilitation. That is key to public safety across our state, including in Sioux Falls. That's pivotal. And lastly, we've got to address addiction head on. Yes, the drug numbers are down 6.25%. Yes, it was good to secure that southern border, but we have an opportunity in our state with about $100 million that have come in that I believe the mayors of our largest cities have a great plan, and I'm going to continue to work on that as Attorney General because I think it's an important part of public safety across South Dakota. So I'll just conclude really where I started. The numbers that you heard today demonstrate that our state and Sioux Falls is a safe place to live, but don't ever take it for granted. Please continue to support law enforcement and our efforts. Thank you, and it's now open for questions.
Marty, before you go too far. No, I think you're fine. Although I did just realize that somebody should have brought a cake. There's so many short-timers in here, including you. You just mentioned the settlement, the opioid settlement. You were here, 6 months ago with the mayors of Rapid City and Sioux Falls talking about how that money should go to prevention and dealing with that. And the legislature, it wasn't even the legislature, the department turned around and sliced and diced it up, and it sure doesn't sound like they want to spend money on that. What are you telling them?
I'm telling them, number one, how important this is, how we have an opportunity with that kind of funding to make a difference on prevention and treatment. I'm telling them that the mayor of Sioux Falls and the mayor of Rapid City have come together with a good plan, a plan that builds in what they're already doing in Sioux Falls and Rapid City, and that builds in to help other communities. I mean, I want to see, I may not get to see it as Attorney General, but the future Attorney General, future settlements, I think they can move it forward on Pierre and Aberdeen. But right now, we have the opportunity with those dollars to put it in Sioux Falls and Rapid City and make a difference, and I think we should do that. And I think that conversation is going to continue for the next 2 weeks of session.
So you're confident that those guidelines that were put out are not confident. You're hopeful that those guidelines that were released aren't going to be the final word.
I wouldn't say I'm confident in it. I'm just saying that I believe we have a good plan to address addiction in South Dakota. We worked with the mayor's offices. I'm supporting that, and I'm not alone in supporting that, but at the end of the day, it will be up to the legislature and the governor to decide that. But I will continue to be a strong voice that we can get further ahead of addiction beyond just the 6.25% reduction this year by putting those dollars to use, and we have a good plan to do that. And a plan that I like as Attorney General because it includes an RFP process to take out some of the concerns that you could find in putting out $100 million.
And on another topic you talked about and addressed.
You got to ask these other guys questions.
I will.
All right.
This is my last chance on all this. On probation, we just spent $600+ million on a prison that's going to stay in Sioux Falls, and we all know what that means for us, and we're fine with it. But the county has spent, both counties have spent enormous amounts of money on public safety and the court system, and the city is paying enormous amounts of money to keep the link open. And the legislature, I believe yesterday, shot down $2.7 million for recidivism. Why is that message not getting through to the legislature, all the good work that's happening here?
There is a lot of good work happening here, and what I would say to that is the state still has its opportunity to be a good partner, and that's with the $99 million settlements. That can address, when you start talking about prevention and treatment, a lot of the issues that tie back to what you described, tie back to my concerns with probation and parole. I mean, I'm all for rehabilitation, but if you don't have the programs available, you're not keeping the public safe and you're not doing the right thing.
They don't seem to want to spend money on it.
I think we're going to have an opportunity yet this session to have a conversation about the good work in bringing in $99 million into opioid settlements and the opportunity we have with Paul TenHaken and Jason Solomon's plans that I support.
I don't know to whom this question will be tackled by, but with the 3 non-guilty verdicts that we've seen in recent months, how does that fit into the public safety picture?
Yeah, I think we talked about that a little bit. We did State's Attorney Daniel Hagar and I did an interview I think it was a couple of weeks ago about that topic. And again, I think homicides grab attention. Homicides grab the story. As State's Attorney and I talked about, prosecuting a homicide case is incredibly difficult. There's a lot of work from law enforcement that goes in. There's a lot of work from the prosecutors. And again, it kind of speaks back to previous things. We can grab the 1 or 2, 3 incidents, right? It just shows the complexity of police work. It isn't necessarily indicative of trends or issues that we're seeing. It's just a case-by-case basis. Also talked about the fact that the juries ultimately have the final say. We respect juries' decision, but our investigators put a ton of time, energy, and effort into where the evidence leads them. Work closely with our state's attorney's office to produce the best possible case. But our legal system remains, again, the finest in the world, and ultimately people are judged by 12 of their peers, and that's a respect to the system and the complexity of these cases, not so much the overall public safety picture. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is, again, not to read too much into a small streak, right? We're working with our law enforcement partners. They're bringing us good cases. Those big cases get their best effort. They get our best effort. And ultimately, the jury gets to decide whether the evidence meets that beyond a reasonable doubt burden. But what I can tell you, if you look just last week, we had 2 bigger cases that went to trial. We had a felony hit and run with death. We had a domestic aggravated assault with strangulation. Both of those were guilties, right? So you do see juries weighing evidence. You see law enforcement bringing cases to my office. You see them getting prosecuted. That's what our job is. We're going to keep working. We're not going to be deterred from seeking justice just because you have a not guilty in a jury trial. We will continue to work hard at these cases. We will continue to circle back with our law enforcement partners and say, what can we continue to do well and what can we do better? We're going to do that whether it's guilty or not guilty.
I understand. I have another for a follow-up. Just in terms, because I know that you guys say that there's no trends, but just in terms of the last 3 cases, was there anything hard to the juries that they found difficult, or was there anything systematically challenging?
Yeah, I would say each case is unique in and of itself, and the challenges that are presented are unique in and of itself. And so, again, not trends, but each case is so, like I said, remarkable in its uniqueness that it's hard to say across the board. I will tell you this, though, from my period in law enforcement, which is now 20-plus years, again, nowhere near as long as Milstead, but Milstead would tell you the same thing, is that through the course of careers, juries' expectations change. What a jury expects, how juries process what was beyond a reasonable doubt maybe is different for each person that's in that case. So I think recognition of maybe a changing jury expectation, which is somewhat crafted or formulated by what they see on TV. When you see TV, every case is solved within an hour, and there's the perfect piece of DNA right next to everything, and it ties it together, right? Well, the reality of police work and the reality of investigation, the reality of prosecution, is it's much harder than that, and the cases that go together get our people's best efforts. But again, we will continue, as State Attorney Hagar said, to put forth our best efforts. Each case is the next chance to work forward and to bring justice. And our investigators in particular, as we've talked about some of these verdicts, are completely committed to the pursuit of justice, as our prosecutors and the system itself. So we'll continue to push forward, but again, recognizing what juries expect, maybe how best to work through some of these barriers is something that we'll continue to do.
If I can just add to that, I think it's also important to remember the cases that are ending up at trial. Those are the hard cases. In this same period of time, we've had 2 homicide cases that have resulted in pleas, right? So we're getting good results in homicide cases. It's not every homicide case is going the wrong direction for us. But it's also important to remember when you look at these are cases from a year and a half ago, right? We are always improving. We are gaining lab capabilities. So when we talk with juries and they say, boy, I wish we had this video, or I wish that we had this DNA evidence. Sometimes 2 years ago, we didn't have a lab that could do that. And we see those advances. So that's a great thing with law enforcement. They're looking for what are ways that we can set up different investigative techniques, what labs can we utilize, and that gives me and my lawyers the opportunity to say, okay, here's some new evidence that we can have. But that's all moving forward. Again, we're not deterred. It's disappointing to have not guilties because we're in there with evidence trying to earn those guilty verdicts. But the jury, and it's a great system, gets that final say. So we respect that.
For Chief Thum, looking specifically at population of Sioux Falls, the square miles of the city, calls for service, and clearance rate, and then taking those numbers and looking at your maximum force. What's your authorized maximum? When do you forecast that may need to increase, and what goes into determining whether or not you need more officers?
Yep, so good question. Under the TenHaken administration, we've grown steadily each year. And again, kind of germane to the recent conversation about growth requiring funds, requiring tax base and things that work with that. Our program and our projection is to grow every single year. We continue to look into that and try to make sure that we have resources to do that. You saw we added 7 FTEs this year, 6 officers of forensic specialists, and my projection is that we're going to continue to need to grow. It's to the point where, again, we are almost growing at a point where in order to add officers, to take a year where we wouldn't add any would be a step backwards. Again, you'll find in our part of the country, we staff efficiently. Our officers are some of the hardest working officers in the nation, and we'll continue to push forward with that growth. But understanding comes from the public that takes funds and that takes support. We've had the great support under this council and this mayor's office, and we have no reason to believe that support won't continue. So when people ask this question, I say, sustained growth. You could throw a big number at something. You could say, hey, we'll hire 20 officers next year. That's playing catch up, and that's really hard with the current pool of applicants to fill those positions around the country. We sit at roughly about 5% unfilled right now for positions, which puts us well above other agencies our size in the country. But to say staffing's not a challenge, it's always going to be a challenge. We're always going to have to be working to get applicants, and that comes back to You gave me another soapbox question, so I'm going to go for it. We need to message to our young people, because here's what we've seen. We've seen, again, post-2020, I don't know how many people have said to me, I would never want your job, I would never let my kid do your job. We see that with teaching too right now. Why? Because of some of the challenges of being a teacher. Well, to think that messaging isn't going to impact the hiring pool is somewhat naive. There isn't an officer that hasn't had that said to him over the past 5 years. Well, if not you, but who? I think we need reverse messaging now that says, hey, you know, to our young people, and I see it changing a little bit as we get further from the post-2020 era, where people are looking for public service jobs. They're looking for ways to serve a community and have a profession that has meaning or purpose. And again, I usually stump for teachers too. I'll tell you, teaching and law enforcement are two ways that you can do that. But how we message that to our young people is key, because we've been doing the opposite for several years. And again, in order to get, and we want to produce local, regional people who want to work for their community and their department. We always have transplants that come from other parts of the country because they recognize how good it is to work here. But the workforce we want to develop and build is regional and local, and that comes from messaging to young people that this is a job worth doing, which is a counterculture message apparently. So, but that's something that we need to pick up as a community.
Do you have that maximum authorized number or?
308.
308, thank you.
Yep. And again, as we start through budgeting process this year, we're looking to add to that number, and we'll be, adding, I can't say because we got to go through the process, but we'll be adding officers to that number.
Mayor, I'd like you to address something on that same topic from earlier. Is it frustrating for you when we, the city and the county and everybody, is committed to public safety, committed to mentoring, committed to addiction, fighting addiction, and the funds for that don't follow? Whether it's the link or recidivism, there's this resistance to spend money on that side of it. Is that frustrating for you as you have gone through this process?
Well, we're the only, I guess, prison location that didn't kick and fight and scream and say not here. And so with the caveat that we need then support from our state and legislature on programs, right? And yesterday was a great first test, and it failed the test because the legislature voted down a bill that would have provided $2.7 million in recidivism funding for programming behind the walls. So I guess the question is, are the audio and the video going to match from what we saw for the past several years of all the, Sioux Falls is the great place for the prison, but what about all the programming? Well, yesterday was the litmus test, and it failed. So we didn't kick and scream. We said we're going to take one for the team, and this prison will be here, and you didn't see me putting letters, and you didn't see me fighting it. But we're going to have this prison for another 100 years, and you saw Gromer's numbers. And what he's saying is we are dealing with repeat offenders every single day. That's half, third of their jail is repeat offenders of people that are being released from that parole factory up the hill. So if we don't do anything differently and we're going to expect different results and they keep voting down appropriations for us to try and do something different, we're going to have the same results. So am I frustrated about yesterday? Yeah, because we were told for several years that we're going to do some things different. So my hope is that the recidivism task force that's being stood up, when that comes to fruition and some of those results get put before them and they go through that process, that they put their money where their mouth is and support that. And in fact, I wasn't going to share this, but in this room, 1 week from Thursday, I'm having a Native American roundtable. First time the city has ever done that. Invited all the 9 tribes and the tribal chair people. I've heard from a good share of them. They're going to be here. It's close to the public. It's close to it's close to the media. But we need to recognize the fact that Sioux Falls cares for a lot of the disenfranchised population across the state. 60% of the people we serve at the link are Native American. Okay. And the link gets this much funding from the state right now, which is why Marty is saying Sioux Falls knows where the needs are. They need some money, okay? So we're doing all we can, But the question that the state always has to answer is not what they will fund, it's what they won't fund and pass on to us as the cities to try and figure out. That's typically what I've seen over the last several years. So,
Yeah, I got to tag on to that, sorry. We talk about public safety, and we talked about this conference today about the excellent work law enforcement does, both at the state, local, and federal level, to catch people, hold them accountable to the crimes they commit, and to make sure that they get within the judicial system to work through that. And that's one part of public safety. The other part of public safety, which is what we all play in, is having less people to catch. The reality is that as law enforcement, we are like everybody else. We would like to be paid the same amount of money to do a little less work, if that makes sense. We're fine if our paycheck comes in. We don't need more people committing crimes. What we need is the rehabilitative structure and put in place to keep people from entering into the system and staying in the system. And I think that's a high-level concept that as the public they need to understand, because, again, I go talk to every lunch club or community group. They're like, well, tell me about what you're doing as law enforcement. I go, we're really good at what we do. In fact, as a collective law enforcement unit around the state, few do it better than we do within South Dakota on the collaboration front. But my flip side is tell me what you're doing to contribute to public safety. And that looks like a lot of different things depending where you're at and what your sphere of influence is. And so it's a long-winded way to say we want people to be rehabilitated. We want less people committing crimes. We want less people to catch. And that's the other side of public safety that doesn't always get acknowledged or talked about. And that's something we all play a part in. We don't have to wear a badge to do that. That's something we can do within our day-to-day lives and with what we choose to support or not support as a community.
all right. You got one last question? We'll go one last question in the back. Yep.
Sorry to revert back to the non-guilty verdicts, but as far as the victims go, is there anything that's being done to reassure them and,
We've talked about this topic quite a bit. Be happy to talk to you afterwards a little bit. We've done a couple longer interviews on this and be happy to hit on this. But to your point, like the victim, the deceased, we seek justice for them, and obviously we try to do our best to that ability. The family that sometimes is working through these cases, we communicate closely with them. I receive letters in my office from some of them talking about our work and how we work together with them. Our investigators have a close relationship with them. Our prosecutors have a close relationship with them. And again, we have had a run of years within our community where we got guilty verdicts. The reality is it doesn't always pan out that way. But again, we are not deterred by this. We'll continue to put our professional foot forward and again, work with victims, work with families, and make sure that we continue to seek justice.
Yeah, in the state's attorney's office, we have victim witness assistants who come alongside those victims throughout the pendency of a case. They're trying to help get them connected to services that they may need. It's actually a really good partnership I have with the Attorney General's office. They help fund one of the victim witness assistants to handle some of those bigger cases in my office. So regardless of what that verdict is in court, we have individuals who are trained very good at what they do, who are helping those victims navigate the system, navigate getting mental health help, and other services as well. Thank you.
What's your estimated success rate of conviction or trial? 95, 98, what is it?
I don't know the answer to that because I've never tried to run an office with that, because I think if you start looking and saying, well, we want to get to 90%, does that mean that we're not offering pleas in cases because we want to take stronger ones to trial to try and boost up that number? So I think it's a trap to try and look at a certain percentages and say, we're not meeting our metric. We're chasing justice, and so sometimes that could be reducing a charge. Sometimes that could be dismissing a case. Sometimes it's taking a case to trial that we know is going to be a dogfight, because then that victim knows that there's going to be a system that will at least fight for them. And so I don't have that percentage, and it's nothing I've really even tried to measure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.